Okay, before we start out on our lesson with mitosis today, I want you to go to this link and watch this video before we start. It gives you a lot of background information and helps you really kind of wrap your brain around what I'm going to talk to you about. If you don't do that, this might be a lot of confusion for you. All right, so mitosis. So we're talking about cell division that happens in the nucleus where our DNA is stored. Mitosis results in genetically identical body cells. So when you are growing and developing normally, this is happening in your body all the time. Why do cells divide? That's an important thing that we need to understand. It can take place for many different reasons. It's important for asexual reproduction. So in organisms that do not use sexual reproduction, cell division is the way that they grow, divide, and reproduce, make more of themselves. Most growth in a multicellular organism, that's like you and me, that's a cat, that's a dog, that's a plant, that's anything that's more than one cell, happens because cell division makes new cells. Here's a multicellular organism, an example, and a unicellular. That is one cell. So like an amoeba, a bacteria, things like that are unicellular. They would undergo asexual reproduction. So it would be important for cell growth, especially if you were only one cell. So what are the different functions of cell division between unicellular and multicellular organisms? Well, it's needed for both. For development, it's needed for growth, it's needed for repair, and it's needed for reproduction. So what happens to the genetic material during cell division? Remember, we talked about DNA is your genetic material. It is the information stored in your cells, tells us everything about ourselves or any organism. And eukaryotic cells, that's a fancy word for cells that have a nucleus. You are a eukaryotic cell. A cat is has eukaryotic cells. A plant has eukaryotic cells. All things that have a nucleus are eukaryotic. And that's where the DNA is found. A DNA molecule contains the information that determines the traits that living things inherit and that they need to live. So during most of the cell's life cycle, the DNA is found in a mass of loose strands called chromatin. So that's going to just hang out in the nucleus and loose strands just chilling. Before the cell division happens, DNA is duplicated. So after it's hanging out as chromatin, it starts to come together. It starts to have a structure and it starts the division. So as cell division begins, the chromatin are compacted into visible structures called chromosomes. This is a chromosome. So here we have a chromosome. We have our DNA. It's getting compacted, right? And then all that compaction goes to make a chromosome. So a duplicated chromosome is made of two identical structures called chromatids. So one of these lines here is a chromatid. This other one is a chromatid. Together, they make a chromosome, okay? So you have the DNA, it's wound tightly, and that makes, all of this wound up, makes a chromatid. Two chromatids together is a chromosome. Okay, so here's a picture of DNA, unwound, loosely wound DNA, that's DNA. A chromosome is when you have these two chromatids. So all of these doubles that you see here are chromosomes. This is a chromatid and this is a chromatid. Together they make a chromosome. So what are the stages of the cell cycle? So how does all this cell division take place? A cell cycle can be divided into three stages. We have interphase, mitosis, and cytokinesis. In interphase, this is where the cell will hang out for most of its life. It's not dividing. It spends the majority of its time here in interphase. But as the cell grows to about twice its original size, it starts to carry out its normal life activities. It continues the growing, the moving, and responding to the environment. Cells also duplicate their chromosomes in interphase. These are all the things that happen during interphase. Cells duplicate their chromosomes is also an interphase. The next stage is mitosis, and there are 4 steps here we're going to talk about in mitosis. Interphase happens before, then we enter into mitosis, which there are 4 steps, and then we enter into cytokinesis, which is the final part of cell division. So in mitosis, the part of the cell cycle during which the nucleus divides, that is mitosis. Prokaryotes, they do not undergo mitosis because they don't have a nucleus. So the part of the cell cycle during which the nucleus divides, that can only happen in organisms with a nucleus, also known as eukaryotes. Mitosis will result, in the end, in 2 nuclei that are identical to the original nucleus. And this is an important piece of information here. In the end, you're going to start with 1 cell that divides into 2 that are identical to the original nucleus. When mitosis is complete, the cell has 2 identical sets of chromosomes in 2 separate nuclei. So here are your stages. Now, if you watched those Amoeba Sisters and their wonderful video before you started, they called it PMAT. So P for prophase, M for metaphase, A for anaphase, and T for telophase. That's a great way to remember the order and what happens. So pro means before. So this is what's happening before we get into the division piece. So you've got cells lining up. Sorry, let's go back. And then you go to metaphase, where your chromosomes line up in a single line in the middle. In anaphase, they are pulled apart by the spindle fibers, and they move away from the center. Anaphase, away. And telophase is when you get 2, T for 2 new nuclei. So let's look at these specifically. Prophase, the chromatin, and the nucleus condense into chromosomes. So you've got chromosomes that have appeared. Instead of just hanging out all that chromatin, it's zipped up here. It's really gotten compacted. And the membrane around the nucleus begins to break down. So this membrane starts to break down because there's a membrane there. How are those chromosomes going to get out to start this process of cell division? So pro means before. These are the things that happen before the division. In metaphase, the chromosomes line up in the middle of the cell, metaphase middle. So you've got them lined up nice and neat in the middle. In anaphase, this is when each chromosome breaks up into 2 chromatids. So remember, a chromatid is 1 arm of the chromosome. And then they're pulled to opposite sides. So anaphase pulled away from the center. Do you see what's happening? Can you start to see that this is a cell that's going to be divided into, and this is going to be your second cell? And lastly, you have telophase, and this is where a new nuclear membrane forms around each group. So you can see this new nuclear membrane forming, and the chromosomes start to chill out again and unwind into chromatin. And then after mitosis, so those were the 4 steps of mitosis: prophase, metaphase, anaphase, telophase. At the end of mitosis, cytokinesis is the last step, and this is where the cytoplasm of that single first cell that we started with is split into 2, and then the cycle starts again with these 2 new cells. So each of these cells will go through prophase, metaphase, anaphase, telophase, cytokinesis, prophase, metaphase, anaphase, telophase, cytokinesis. So let's talk about cytokinesis for a second. This is the division of the parent cell's cytoplasm. It starts during the last step of mitosis. It begins there in telophase and eventually forms into 2 complete new cells. And in a plant cell, if you don't remember about cells, the Amoeba Sisters have a great video on plant and animal cells and just giving you a tour. But in plant cells, there's a cell wall. So a cell plate forms in cytokinesis, and that cell plate separates the cell into 2 new identical cells with the original cell. So that's a little bit different than an animal cell. An animal cell, you're considered an animal. We do not have a cell plate that forms. Okay, so here are the steps, all arranged nice and neatly for you in a cycle. Nucleus, we've got the chromosomes starting to form. Chromosomes form, they're duplicated, they line up in the middle in metaphase. Anaphase, they're pulled apart. Telophase, they are 2 new nuclei are starting to form. Okay, let's take a quick review. So pause this video as you see the answers. Choose the answer that you think is right, and then kind of see how you scored. Mitosis is division of the membrane, cell wall, nucleus, or plant. Mitosis is division of the nucleus. Do the two cells resulting from mitosis have identical DNA and chromosomes? Pause and answer yes or no. The answer is yes. Mitosis results in two new cells with identical DNA and identical chromosomes. Which shows the stages of mitosis in the correct order from first to last? The answer is prophase, metaphase, anaphase, telophase, PMAT. That is when that came in really handy, I hope. Okay, now let's label each of these stages. So we've got chromatids pulling away from the middle, anaphase. Next, we have the chromosomes lining up in the middle, metaphase. Here we have two new nuclei forming with chromatids in each. That's telophase, and I bet you can guess this one. We've got the chromosomes forming here. That's prophase before. Here is an actual picture, and I included the source. This is an onion cell, and you can see all the different phases of mitosis happening here. So here we have prophase, where we're getting ready to divide. Metaphase, all those chromosomes are lined up right in the middle of that cell. Anaphase, the chromatids separate and are pulled to the spindles at each pole. And then interphase, where they're just hanging out, chilling, spending most of their life in interphase. So this is a great picture, a real life picture. You could do this yourself if you had the proper stains and techniques with an onion cell. And then you could reveal what stage of mitosis each one of those little onion cells are in. All right, so that's the end of our notes for mitosis. Please let me know if you have any questions.